Welcome back, everybody. We have been talking about personality disorders, and I've covered the cluster B personality types. And that type often has emotion that is erratic, sometimes dysregulated, and sometimes these cluster B types are very dramatic in their expressiveness. So the final one under the cluster B that I'm going to talk about today is called Antisocial Personality Disorder. Now, it doesn't mean the person is not social, which sometimes people might make that mistake. It means that the person does not follow the social norms or the social rules. They really have disregard for hurting others or hurting society. Some people might define this as a sociopath, and antisocial personality disorders are sometimes called sociopaths. Now, these individuals can be aggressive, they can be hostile, they can be violent, but they also can be charming and manipulative. They're deceitful, they often lie, and they have no empathy. They really have very little regard for other people's feelings. Now, how did they get this way? Well, like I've said before when talking about personality disorders, there's two components. There's the genetic component. So maybe they have certain genes that predispose them for this type of problem. And then there can be life situations or circumstances that trigger those genes that predispose them. So what type of life circumstances? Well, sometimes it's abuse, maybe physical abuse, maybe violence, or neglect, or emotional abuse. Sometimes these individuals grew up with a parent who had antisocial personality. It often runs in a higher incidence in men than women. So what does one do if you're in a relationship with someone like this? Because these individuals have a real difficult time in relationships. And sometimes, as a result of this personality disorder, they might find themselves in trouble with the law or in jail. They do have a difficult time connecting and relating to people. So as I've said before, the solutions often involve psychotherapy. But for these individuals, they often don't see them as having the problem. They believe it's other people's problem. So they often blame others and don't take ownership or responsibility for their own issues. In fact, sometimes these individuals are in therapy due to a court order. Unfortunately, that doesn't motivate them because the motivation is externally driven instead of internally driven, which makes this group really difficult to work with, especially if they're not there under their own volition. Now, sometimes, as I've also said before, sometimes personality disorders also struggle with anxiety or depression. And in that instance, certain medications can help. With this disorder in particular, it's not uncommon for there to be addictions. So working through some of the addictions can also be beneficial. Anger management may be part of the treatment. Cognitive behavioral therapy is often one of the treatments that is most beneficial with many of the personality disorders. Again, CBT, changing the way you think, becoming more aware of other people's emotions and your own, learning how to regulate those feelings in a healthy and constructive way. Learning good communication skills and how to manage conflict in a more appropriate and more effective way. For this personality disorder in particular, group therapy can be very helpful. Being in a group with other people with the same diagnosis can be powerful and effective. And sometimes family therapy is also of benefit. So there are things to do. There are ways to work with personality disorders. And next time, I will talk about the cluster C personality disorders, and there are 3 of them. And I'll go through each week and discuss and define all 3 of those. But personalities are very interesting, fascinating, the way people's personality develops and the impact that it has on their life. So if you or someone you know struggles with some of these characteristics, I would encourage you, take the next step. Incorporate some of the strategies that I've mentioned. Use the resources that are available online and get help. Because you don't have to live the rest of your life struggling. There is hope for change. Until next time, Dr. Tony for